can vary between colleges and universities in the interviewing process, and it is dependent on the amount of competition and candidates for the role, as well as the type of role, for example, full-time, permanent versus contract, part-time. Some of the stages that I have personally experienced for interviews for teaching positions at colleges involve for example, initial video recording and screenings through a virtual platform that HR asks you to download onto your computer. Sometimes it could be a written task or a test that is also used for initial screening. There are also one-to-one interviews with the associate deans or dean or the member of executive team or program coordinator if we are thinking of other programs or in the universities. A lot of the interviews that I've participated in or have applied for involved a live panel interview with 3 to 4 members, both virtual or in person. In those panel interviews, they include at least a member from the faculty team or faculty unit, the associate dean, and an HR representative. It could vary with a university interview, but for colleges, that's what I have experienced. And almost always, a lot of interviews will involve a teaching demonstration, which I'll explain a little bit later in the next slides. So moving on, the structure for the interview. There are several types of questions that candidates are expected to answer in order for a panel to make an informed decision. Some of these questions involve motivations and goals. These are your typical questions that you see here. For example, what draws you to teach at EAP at so-and-so college and university, and how does this align with your career goals? A behavioral question about the past. These give a lot of insight on how the candidates handle past situations to understand how well they would perform in the expected role. An example here is tell us about a conflict over marking within a team. How did you handle it? And document changes for the next term. Another type of question you can encounter in a interview is situational hypothetical questions. These test the candidate's problem solving, conflict resolution, and critical thinking skills in situations that may be encountered in the role they are applying for. An example here is you suspect AI-assisted paraphrase in multiple submissions. How do you respond? Finally, this can occur at the end of the interview or at the beginning of an interview. The live teaching demonstration, the candidate will need to perform a live teaching demonstration on a specific grammar point or an option provided by the employer. After the demonstration, there will also be questions from the panel about the teaching demonstration and the candidate's thought process. The next slide we see here is interviewing tips, and here are some of the tips that I have received in the past and have used to help me in the interview process. This is the first one here is STAR or the CAR method. I'm more familiar with the STAR method, but the CAR method is quite similar. STAR stands for situation, task, action, response, or result. CAR is a shorter form of that, context, action, response, result. And this is the process of how we would answer a question. So those questions that we were looking at in the previous slide, using this method is a great way to keep interviewees answering questions more directly and more focused, as opposed to rambling, over talking, and speaking more than the allotted time. You can see the example here. In an EAP seminar, I added speaking roles and posted prompts in D2L, and weekly participation rose from 10 to 20 students in 3 weeks. So it covers the context, action, response, and result of what was done. And this is what interviewers are looking for, things that are answers that are specific, results-based, and quantifiable. Other tips we can do here are be more than prepared and expect the unexpected. Making sure that you bring a set of paper notes, paper copies of your resume and lesson plans, even if the interviewers don't ask you for that, it's always good to bring them in a small like folder. And bringing an extra laptop. As we all know, there's always technology issues that can always occur during an interview. So having your own laptop, even having a USB drive, I know we don't use those as often and everything's saved on cloud, but having a backup USB drive in case something happens with the internet or Wi-Fi, those things are always, just, very helpful. And finally, this is something that not all of us think of doing, but I remember one interview that I did where this was actually required. So, but the creating your own portfolio of your previous work, this helps you sort of self-reflect. And for a lot of highly sought after competitive full-time positions, this is something that they may request. It allows you to reflect on your past teaching experiences, sort of consolidate what you've learned and achieved. Even if it's not used during the interview, it just helps you sort of compartmentalize what you have learned over the past several years during teaching. And finally, here's some extra tips that maybe Bill, if I could ask you to maybe fill in on some of these. These are some other useful tips that, as interviewers would suggest, may be useful.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this before, but for sure, you need to have a phone number usually for most positions so someone can reach you and just, a voicemail if possible, and if you're not available. And of course, just be prepared to receive a call. So, you better, it's best to be warm to any cold callers. I know we get a lot of spam calling or whatever. Telemarketing calls that can happen, but just be prepared. So be your happiest and your warmest self when you answer the phone days after you apply. Um, yeah, I think it's helpful to know like as much as you can about the job that you're applied for and the institution that you're interested in. So, visit the website and try to figure out what the institution's programs and values are. If you know people who've worked there before, if they're willing to share information and talk a bit about their experience, that's good. Just to make sure you're a good fit. And the first thing you should do is just introduce yourself when you come, whether it's in person or online, and just say your name. Just in the event that maybe your name is not whatever, you maybe think it might be just how people should address you. My name is, you can call me, blah, blah, blah. I think that's helpful just to say that right off the bat and just to confirm who you are, of course. Yeah, and I think that's basically it. Just some things. It has happened. I've been in an interview where I wasn't sure how I should call the person, and so I had to say, how would you like me to address you? So I think it's really important to do those things. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you, Bill.